Most men grow up believing that the secret to winning a woman's heart lies in kindness, patience, and unconditional devotion. They imagine that if they offer her stability, protect her feelings, and never let her down, she will stay loyal forever. Yet reality shatters this belief in the harshest way possible. Over and over, men witness the strange contradiction that women often chase the men who wound them the most. The ones who ignore their messages, who withdraw their affection, who make them cry, somehow end up being the very men they can't seem to walk away from. And for the man who has given nothing but love and loyalty, watching this happen feels like a betrayal of everything he thought he understood about relationships. The truth is uncomfortable, and most people avoid saying it out loud because it challenges the fairy tale of romance we were all raised to believe. But attraction doesn't play by the rules of fairness. Attraction is not a moral system that rewards good behavior. It is a primal force rooted in psychology, chemistry, and ancient survival instincts. And sometimes, the very things that cause emotional pain create the deepest hooks in a woman's mind. That is why the man who hurts her can keep her chasing, while the man who adores her slowly fades into the background of her life. This dynamic begins in the subtle way women interpret value. When someone is always available, always eager to please, and always saying yes, the subconscious begins to associate that presence with predictability. Predictability feels safe, but it does not spark desire. On the other hand, when a man withholds attention, when he is inconsistent, or when his affection seems uncertain, her brain interprets that scarcity as a sign of higher value. It is the same way people crave rare treasures more than common stones. What is abundant feels ordinary. What is scarce feels priceless. And this scarcity, even when it causes pain, fuels a powerful emotional drive to chase. This is not about women consciously deciding they want to be treated badly. It is not about masochism or choosing suffering. It is about the way the human brain reacts to uncertainty. Imagine the feeling of gambling, pulling the lever of a slot machine, not knowing if the next spin will bring a jackpot or nothing at all. That tension between reward and disappointment creates one of the most addictive experiences known to psychology. When a man's attention comes and goes unpredictably, it mirrors that same cycle. Every ignored call, every cold silence, every sudden withdrawal becomes the emotional equivalent of a lost spin. And when he finally gives her a small piece of affection again, the dopamine rush hits harder than before. Her mind gets hooked, not on the man himself, but on the cycle of tension and relief he creates. Meanwhile, the good man watches in disbelief. He cannot comprehend how his loyalty, his steady presence, and his kindness seem to push her away instead of pulling her closer. He doesn't realize that in giving her everything up front, he has left no mystery, no uncertainty, no challenge for her emotions to grip onto. It is not that kindness is unattractive, but kindness without boundaries often comes across as weakness. And weakness, whether fair or not, drains respect. A woman may say she wants the man who never hurts her, but if he also never risks losing her, she senses deep down that his devotion is not a choice born of strength, but a necessity born of fear. And people rarely respect what they feel they have already conquered. The paradox is cruel. The man who hurts her does not always do it out of cruelty. Sometimes it is his detachment, his focus on his own life, his unwillingness to make her the center of his world that creates the perception of value. His strength lies in his independence, and even when that independence stings, it signals to her subconscious that he is not desperate for her approval. That subtle signal makes her chase harder, because deep inside, respect and desire are tightly connected. A woman may love a man who is kind, but she will only feel unshakable desire for the man she respects. And respect cannot exist without boundaries, without the possibility of loss, without the awareness that he can walk away. This reality leaves many men angry, bitter, or hopeless, believing that women only want toxic partners. But that interpretation misses the deeper truth. Women are not addicted to cruelty, they are addicted to strength. And unfortunately, weakness dressed as devotion does not inspire the same passion as strength wrapped in detachment. This is why so many women find themselves chasing the man who seems indifferent, even when he hurts them, and ignoring the man who showers them with love without making her earn it. The human heart doesn't chase what is freely given. It chases what feels like it could be lost at any moment. When you see this pattern for what it really is, everything changes. Suddenly, the stories of women leaving good men for those who mistreat them make sense. It is not about choosing pain over love. It is about the invisible psychological wiring that links scarcity to value, tension to desire, and boundaries to respect. Understanding this doesn't mean you need to hurt women to keep them interested. It means you must recognize the hidden truth that devotion without strength becomes invisible. A man who never risks losing her ends up losing her anyway. and the man who is unafraid to stand firm, even if it stings, becomes unforgettable. When we look deeper into this strange cycle, what we often find is that the attraction isn't to the pain itself, but to the roller coaster of emotions it creates. A man who is consistent, steady, and predictable may provide peace and stability, but he rarely triggers the brain into releasing the same waves of dopamine and adrenaline that come with uncertainty. Every mixed signal, every cold shoulder, and every sudden display of attention creates an emotional high, a rush that feels intoxicating in the moment. The problem is that once someone becomes used to this rhythm, their body craves it, almost like an addiction. The calmness of a stable connection begins to feel boring by comparison, even though it's what would actually sustain them in the long run. This is why many women may find themselves drawn back toward men who hurt them, even after promising themselves they would never repeat the same mistake again. But this cycle is not only about chemical reactions, it's also about deeply rooted self-perceptions. If someone grows up believing that love must be earned, or that they are not worthy of unconditional care, they might subconsciously feel that pain and rejection are natural parts of love. So when a man treats them poorly, it doesn't immediately register as a red flag, it feels familiar. And familiarity often feels safer than the unknown, even if the known pattern is destructive. This is one of the reasons why so many people, not just women, find themselves repeating relationships that are painful. They confuse the feeling of familiarity with the feeling of love, and by doing so, they stay locked in cycles that only reinforce their doubts about themselves. What complicates this further is the cultural narrative that often glorifies men who are distant, powerful, or emotionally unavailable. Movies, stories, and even music have long portrayed the bad boy as the ultimate challenge, the prize that only the most special woman can win over. This narrative convinces many that if they can change him, if they can make him commit or soften, it means they are truly unique. The pursuit becomes less about the man himself and more about the validation that comes from being the one who finally tames him. But the truth is, in most cases, this transformation never happens, and instead, the cycle of hurt only deepens. Yet the idea that it could happen is powerful enough to keep women holding on, hoping for a reward that almost never arrives. At the same time, men who hurt women often display traits that on the surface seem very attractive. Confidence, independence, mystery, and strength are all qualities that naturally draw attention. However, when those qualities are combined with selfishness, detachment, or cruelty, they become dangerous. The tricky part is that in the early stages, it can be difficult to separate healthy confidence from arrogance or independence from emotional unavailability. Many women only discover the difference once they are already emotionally invested, making it far harder to walk away. By that point, the bond has already been reinforced by chemistry, by hope, and by the very human fear of losing someone they've poured themselves into. This creates a painful tug-of-war between logic and emotion, where the mind knows leaving is the right choice, but the heart feels trapped. Another layer in this dynamic is the way that intermittent reinforcement works in relationships. When a man gives attention inconsistently, alternating between affection and withdrawal, it mirrors the same psychological principle that keeps people hooked to gambling. You never know when the reward will come, and that unpredictability creates a stronger attachment than constant attention ever could. Women may find themselves clinging to every positive moment, replaying the memories of when he was kind, while minimizing or excusing the times when he was cold or cruel. The small doses of affection feel magnified, as if they outweigh the pain, even when logically they do not. This is how someone can remain emotionally tied to a relationship that is draining them, because they are always chasing that next moment of warmth, hoping it will be enough to justify staying. This cycle also speaks to a larger truth about how human beings often mistake intensity for intimacy. The dramatic highs and lows of being with someone who hurts you can feel more real, more alive, than the steady calm of a healthy connection. Intensity can easily be confused with depth, but they are not the same. True intimacy requires consistency, vulnerability, and respect, while intensity often thrives on uncertainty, tension, and conflict. Many women who chase men who hurt them are in fact chasing the intensity, believing it to be passion. But the fire that burns hottest often burns out the fastest, leaving behind nothing but ashes. And yet the allure of that fire can be hard to resist, especially for those who mistake the chaos of unstable love for proof that they are deeply connected. The tragedy of this cycle is that it doesn't just end with disappointment. It often erodes self-esteem in ways that make escaping even harder. Every time a woman chases a man who hurts her and he pulls away, a quiet voice inside begins to whisper that she wasn't good enough. Over time, those whispers become louder until she starts to believe them. She begins to doubt her own worth. to wonder if maybe she deserves the treatment she's receiving, and that belief ties her more tightly to the very person who is causing the pain. The man may not even be consciously trying to manipulate, but his inconsistent behavior creates an environment where self-doubt grows like a shadow. And once someone believes they are not worthy of more, they stop searching for better, resigning themselves to a version of love that drains instead of uplifts. Another subtle factor that keeps women chasing men who hurt them is the hope of redemption. Humans are wired to seek resolution, to want closure, and to believe in the possibility of change. If a man shows even the smallest glimpse of vulnerability, or offers a rare moment of kindness after a string of coldness, it can ignite the belief that he is capable of more. Women may cling to these brief windows of hope, telling themselves that if they just love harder or remain patient longer, he will eventually transform. This belief becomes a powerful chain because it keeps them waiting for a breakthrough that may never come. And in the waiting, they sacrifice their own needs, ignoring the reality of who he is in exchange for the fantasy of who he could become. It's also important to understand how attraction is often built not just on who someone is, but on how they make us feel about ourselves. When a man who is typically distant suddenly gives attention, it feels like winning a prize. That attention feels rare, special, and deeply validating. It creates the illusion that he sees something extraordinary in her, because if he doesn't give this to anyone else, it must mean she is different. The danger is that this validation becomes addictive, and she begins to crave it even more than the relationship itself. Every withdrawal of affection becomes a cliffhanger, every moment of tenderness a powerful reward. In this sense, chasing a man who hurts her is less about him and more about the high of being chosen, even if it's only temporarily. But the cost of this cycle is heavy. The longer it continues, the harder it becomes to separate personal identity from the pain of the relationship. Women may begin to question whether they are capable of attracting a healthier kind of love, or whether they are destined to repeat the same painful patterns. They might even convince themselves that this is just how relationships are meant to be, normalizing behavior that should never be tolerated. Friends and family may see the damage clearly, but from the inside, the bond feels unbreakable. This is where many women feel trapped, torn between the logic that tells them to walk away and the emotional pull that keeps them holding on. What makes this cycle even more complicated is the way society sometimes romanticizes struggle in love. Stories, songs, and even social media often portray dramatic, painful relationships as proof of passion. The more turbulent the connection, the more real it seems. Women may internalize this message, believing that if love doesn't hurt, it isn't meaningful. This belief can keep them chasing men who hurt them, because walking away feels like giving up on something profound. In reality, love should bring peace, not chaos. But when the world constantly glorifies the storm, calm waters can appear unremarkable. For some, the chase is also about control. If a man is unpredictable, winning his affection feels like gaining power. It becomes a challenge to be the one who finally unlocks his heart, to prove that she can succeed where others have failed. The relationship turns into a competition against an invisible opponent, a battle for significance. The irony is that in trying to gain control, many women end up losing more of themselves, sacrificing self-worth and peace of mind in pursuit of something that was never truly attainable. The chase becomes less about love and more about proving value, even if it comes at a devastating cost. Ultimately, the pattern of chasing men who hurt them is a reflection of deeper needs for validation, for excitement, for redemption, and for a sense of worth. These needs are powerful, and when left unmet in healthier ways, they drive people into connections that mirror wounds rather than heal them. Understanding this is the first step toward breaking free, because once someone can recognize that the attraction is rooted in unmet needs and destructive cycles, they can begin to choose differently. They can see that what feels like love is often just chemistry, what feels like passion is often just chaos, and what feels like destiny is often just a familiar pattern repeating itself. The heartbreaking truth is that many women who chase men who hurt them don't realize that the pain they're experiencing is not proof of love, but a reflection of wounds that were never healed. When a woman grows up associating attention with struggle or love with inconsistency, she unconsciously recreates that same dynamic in adulthood. She doesn't choose it because she enjoys the suffering, she chooses it because it feels familiar. And in human psychology, familiarity often feels safer than the unknown, even if the familiar is toxic. Walking away from these patterns requires not just recognizing the pain, but confronting the beliefs that were planted years earlier. It means asking difficult questions about why hurt feels like home, and why chaos feels like passion. These questions are uncomfortable, but they hold the key to breaking free. Another layer to this cycle is how society tends to blame women for staying, while rarely examining the culture that enables men to act this way. The narrative often paints the woman as desperate, naive, or weak, but that perspective ignores the powerful psychological forces at play. It ignores the fact that manipulation often happens slowly, through small withdrawals and small rewards, until the victim doesn't even realize how trapped they are. It also ignores how deeply rooted the desire for connection is. Human beings are wired for attachment, and when the attachment bond forms, even with someone harmful, it can feel nearly impossible to sever. That's not weakness, that's biology being used against them. Still, biology is not destiny, and awareness is the beginning of change. The moment a woman starts to see the pattern, she gains the ability to step outside of it. She can begin to ask herself why she is drawn to this type of man, what void he is filling, and what it would take to fill that void in healthier ways. Maybe it's the thrill of unpredictability, maybe it's the validation of being chosen by someone who is hard to win over, or maybe it's the unconscious attempt to rewrite an old story by finally getting love from someone who resembles those who withheld it in the past. Whatever the reason, naming it takes away its power. Once the cycle is named, it can be challenged. Breaking the pattern doesn't mean rejecting love or closing off emotionally. It means learning to separate intensity from intimacy and chaos from connection. Real love is not about constant highs and devastating lows, it's about stability, respect, and mutual growth. The challenge is that stability can feel boring at first, especially to someone used to drama. But with time, that calm becomes the foundation for something far deeper and far more lasting than the roller coaster ever could. This is why healing is not about swearing off relationships altogether, but about learning to recognize the difference between real love and addictive attraction. There's also an empowering shift that happens when women begin to reclaim their standards. Instead of asking, "Why doesn't he love me enough?" the question becomes, "Why am I settling for someone who hurts me?" That change in perspective transforms the entire dynamic, because it takes the power out of his hands and places it back into hers. She no longer chases, because she knows her worth doesn't depend on his attention. She no longer accepts crumbs, because she understands she deserves the whole meal. And in that shift, the very type of man who once seemed irresistible begins to lose his appeal. The thrill of unpredictability fades when self-respect is stronger than the need for approval. For men watching this dynamic play out, there is also a lesson. It's easy to assume that women only want men who treat them poorly, but the truth is more complex. Women want strength, confidence, and leadership, but those qualities don't have to come with cruelty or neglect. A man can be strong without being dismissive, confident without being arrogant, and challenging without being hurtful. The issue isn't that women are drawn to pain, it's that they are often conditioned to confuse certain traits with passion. If men can embody those traits while still offering respect and stability, they break the stereotype and create relationships that thrive instead of destroy. The final and perhaps most important piece of this puzzle is hope. No matter how many times someone has chased after pain, no matter how many times they've confused chaos for love, it is always possible to unlearn the cycle. Healing may be slow, but it is real. It begins with awareness, continues with boundaries, and blossoms with the courage to demand more. And once someone experiences real, healthy love, they rarely go back to the roller coaster. Because once you taste peace, drama loses its flavor. At its core, the question of why women chase men who hurt them is not about weakness or foolishness, but about human vulnerability. It's about the longing for love, the search for validation, and the way old wounds shape new choices. It's about how easily desire can be hijacked by inconsistency, and how difficult it is to break free once the cycle begins. But the answer is also about strength, because within every person lies the power to rewrite their story. And the moment someone chooses to walk away from pain and toward respect, the cycle breaks and the chase finally ends.